Welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Hour. I've been doing this kind of show for a long time. First time I ever did a show like this, a live show like this, was 2009, June of 2009. You know the whole history. I'm not going through it all right now. The reason I bring that up is I don't think, and I am getting older and I am forgetting things, I don't think I have ever done a show quite like this before. And what I mean by that is, usually on the weekends, I'm at a big event, right? That's been the case for the majority of the past 10 or so years. And usually those events are happening on a Saturday night. And usually I'll take the first flight home. Usually it's at 6 a.m. or so, and I'll get home, late morning, early afternoon, and then prepare for the show on Monday. So usually there's that one day in between. This show is different. This show is very different. Why? Because as you may know, last night and for the past 4 or 5 days, I was in Cleveland, Ohio, the 216. And I was a part of the Showtime broadcast for the Jake Paul Tyron Woodley fight. And that happened last night. And so I went to bed at around 3:30 a.m., woke up at 4:45, went to the airport. Thank God everything was on time. Landed here in New York at around 9:45, got my stuff, drove to the studio, and now here I am, 12 hours removed from one of the most memorable, one of the greatest, one of the most exciting nights of my career, of my life, dare I say, doing this. And I'll always go out and do these things, and hopefully there's more of those things, and that's great, and that's exciting, but then I come back home. Because this feels like home. This feels like my house. This feels like, okay, this is my furniture. These are my friends, my family members. This feels like home. And so I don't know how this is going to go because I feel like my head is still in the clouds. I feel like my head is spinning. And I feel like yesterday was a dream. I have all this adrenaline, all this momentum, all this stuff inside of me, and I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to wing it. I am on such a high right now after last night's experience that I just wanted to talk about it. And not just talk about the fights themselves, but talk about what it meant to me. And so that's where I want to start. And of course, we got great guests coming up. Mike Perry, Teddy Atlas, Jeremy Piven, Ari Gold of Entourage fame. I mean, who pulls that? Vitor Belfort, Paddy Pimblett. And I'll get to all of that and I'll set them all up in a second. But, over the last few days, there's a part of me that's like, man, Ariel, you're so annoying. You're so annoying. You keep talking about how great this is, how excited you are, how thankful you are, how grateful you are, posting things and all of that. And, for the most part, again, this is the classic, 99% of the comments and stuff, interaction, engagement is positive. You get a few negative. And you focus on the negative. That's human nature. It's stupid, but that's just the way we are or I am. And I see, some people saying, oh, this is not about you. You're making this about yourself. This is not about you. Guess what? It is about me. Because when it's on my platform, my social media, my show, my Twitter, my Instagram, it's allowed to be about me. And you know what? On this Monday, I'm going to puff my chest out just a little bit. Because when you are told time and again that you're done, that you're finished, that it's over, that you'll never work again, that bullets are being put in your head, when you have nights like last night, I'm going to puff my chest out a little bit. I'm going to spike the football just a little bit because I'm freaking proud of everything that we accomplished over the last few days. My small part in all of that, that was a literal dream come true. Young boy, watching boxing, watching fights, dreaming of what it would be like being in those moments, how I would act, what I would do. Dreaming for years, never got that opportunity. And over time, coming to terms with the fact that I would never get that opportunity for various reasons and being okay with it because I had other opportunities, other great moments, other great experiences. But man, I always wanted that one. I always wanted ringside, cage side. I always wanted in the ring, sweaty, chaos, back to you, setting things up with passion, with heart. And I always felt like I could do it. I always believed that I could do it. And dare I say, I believed that I could do it better than others. But I didn't get the opportunity. You know the stories, you know the reasons. We don't have to get into all that crap now. And you start to wonder if you'll ever get that opportunity. And then you start to question yourself. Maybe you can't do it. Maybe you're just, the backstage guy or the podcast guy or the Zoom guy. If you know what the last year and a half was like for me, and then you consider what yesterday was like for me, my first fight back since March of 2020. Again, yes, this is about me. Of course. This is my life. It's always about the fighters on this show, but can I have a moment for a second? I said that line from Drake at the beginning of the show about Tyron Woodley. Someone told me I fell off. Oh, I needed that. I was talking about myself as well. And I think the OGs knew that. The people who have been by my side, who have had my back. You know who you are. And so yesterday was extremely, 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 extremely special for me, meaningful for me, impactful for me. If I never do that again, and that was just a one-off. If I never do that again, I can die a happy man. Thank you, Showtime. Thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to the people who went to bat for me, and you know who you are, who said they wanted me to be a part of this broadcast, to represent the MMA community, to get a shot, because it's a different kind of audience. It's a potential younger, I don't know. Getting to do that show with Mauro Ranallo, who has meant the world to me, who is a friend, who is a mentor, who is a confidant, who was the first person to ever put me on his podcast back in 2007. Shout out to John Pollock, who's the one who reached out to me. Thanksgiving 2007, I was on Fight Network Radio a month and a half after I launched my own website, Jerry Park, and I thought, this is it. Like, this is the mountaintop. I thought that was it. That's how much more Ronaldo means to me. The greatest combat sports announcer in the history of the TV business. The only man who can do pro wrestling, kickboxing, boxing, MMA in his sleep. To sit alongside him ringside for an event like that, in an arena like that, in front of a crowd like that, next to Al Bernstein. And then to work with guys like Brian Custer and Phoenix and everyone behind the scenes. The Barstool guys were great. I mean, the whole thing was just an absolute dream come true. And so, yeah, I was emotional. And I hope that I represented the MMA community. And I hope that I represented everyone who had my back. And I hope that the people who had my back and pushed for me to be involved, I hope that they felt like I proved them right. And it really meant a lot to me to be a part of the Showtime team. And I've heard time and again, I've never worked for Showtime before. I've heard time and again about how that's a family. That's a family. And people throw that word around, right? It's a family. It's a family. There's no backstabbing. Everyone's supporting. And I've worked at a lot of places. And I'm not trying to cast any type of negative light on anywhere else. I've been a part of other families. This is a family. That is a real special team that they have there. And everyone was just so nice and welcoming. It was really cool to be the new guy and everyone's treating you like you've been there for 10, 15 years. And why it meant so much to me that I got to do that for the first time. I never did a weigh-in before. I don't even know if they knew that. And I'd like to think that I represented. I never did the fight night stuff. You all know that. And why it meant so much to me that it was Showtime was, as you know, back in 2017, Mayweather-McGregor, I'm wearing my suit. I take a red eye after this show to go to Staples, California, for the first leg of the media tour, the world tour, LA. I'm standing outside Staples Center. I get a call from Steven Espinoza, who tells me he needs to meet with me before we're about to go in the arena. I'm suited up. It's literally an hour away. And he tells me, we can't have you. Politics, fits were thrown. I am sorry. I tried, but we can't have you. But I'm still going to pay you, and I'm meeting you face to face to let you know that I'm not happy about this, but we got your back. And so for 4 years later, that it would be with that network and with that president, this kind of fight, it just, it felt like full circle. It was really, really special. And the last few weeks have been special with everything just happening at the same time, with the return of this show and all the other stuff and this opportunity. Like, I feel like it's just been an insane time, and I don't want to wake up, and I'm so thankful and grateful. And that's why I feel like I just need to keep talking about it, because you don't understand what it is like, or maybe you do. And you know what? I'm sure most of you do. People think that it's like all silver spoon stuff. It's not. When you have dreams and you know that there is only one life, and someone is telling you, no, they're not telling you we're going to ruin your career. They're telling you we're going to ruin your life. Huge difference. And to come out on the other end with the support of so many, I'm just very, very grateful and thankful. And I'm just so happy that I could come here and share this with you. I have dreamed of that. Like, I'm standing there, and there's Tyron and there's Jake, sweaty, and all you people who made fun of me for never leaving my house, what do you have to say about me now? And I'm looking in their eyes in this great moment, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm actually here. Of course, I'm locked in, and there's Logan Paul, and there's this, and we're talking about tattoos and all this stuff. It was crazy. It was wild, man. So what a night. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And it was just something I will never forget. In the end, as you know, Jake Paul beat Tyron Woodley. He won via split decision. I scored the fight for Jake Paul, just being honest. I thought Tyron won the 4th round. I thought he had the most significant blow of the fight, clearly. If that sequence is happening in the middle of the ring, Jake is falling to the ground. That was a knockdown, but he got saved by the ropes. Them's the breaks. Could have even been a knockdown anyway, because you saw he was holding on to the ropes. I thought Tyron represented himself very well. You know, the big question going into this fight was, would this ruin his legacy? His legacy was on the line. I believe everything that I said before that fight. All the pressure was on Tyron. If Jake would have lost, he would have said, you know, I just went up, I fought the former UFC champion, etc., etc. He had the built-in excuse. He was moving up. He was biting off more than he could chew. And so I felt Tyron can't lose. He can't get knocked out by the YouTube kid. And I'll address that in a second as well. But in the end, he went the distance. He's never fought in a boxing match before. It's a different skill set. It's a different sport. It's not MMA. He had his moments. Do I wish he was, more active on his behalf? Absolutely. But he actually did, in some respects, better than I thought. He got the big punch. There were some rounds where he was active. You were afraid, or at least I was, on his behalf, that it would be the Kamaru Usman Tyron Woodley, who's not throwing anything. And there were some moments, but I thought after he got a little comfortable, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, best round, he started to show some signs. I wouldn't hate it if Tyron, kept at this boxing journey. But how could you possibly say with a straight face now that Jake Paul isn't a fighter? In my opinion, he was a fighter before Sunday night. Anyone who steps through the ropes, I don't care who you're fighting, I don't care what the rounds are, I don't care what the stakes are, I don't care where the platform is, I don't care where the arena, you step through those ropes, you're a fighter, amateur or pro. I have all the respect in the world for anyone who goes through the process, cutting weight, weighing in, rehydrating, fighting in front of people, getting punched in the face, punched in the body. You are a fighter. At this juncture, going into this fight, he had 4 fights under his belt. 1 amateur, 3 professional. Forget about the opponents. You could debate those all day long, but he steps through the ropes. And he's doing it backwards, by the way. Most guys get into fighting to get rich. This guy's rich already. And so that Marvin Hagler line that I always talk about, the satin sheets and all that stuff, you wonder how, it eventually will affect him. Because you even hear a little bit last night in the post-fight interview, like, oh man, I need a break, this and that. Like, This guy doesn't have to do any of this. He doesn't have to get punched in the face. He doesn't have to spar. He doesn't have to go through a training camp. He doesn't have to cut weight. Most guys do all that and stomach all of that because they want to get rich. They want to get famous. They want to get paid. He has all of that already. That's what makes this so crazy and so unique. Never really see this before. That's what is special about this. So while everyone is focusing on the YouTube, the Disney, enough of that. This guy is a fighter. He just went 8 rounds with a former UFC champion. I don't care if it was in kickboxing. I don't care if it was in water polo. I don't care if it was in MMA, in boxing. I don't care what it was. It just so happens to have been boxing. The guy went 8 rounds with a UFC legend, a future Hall of Famer, one of the top 4 best welterweight champions of all time behind George St. Pierre, Matt Hughes, Kamaru Usman, whose last 4 fights were against the top 4 in the welterweight division, Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, Gilbert Burns, Vicente Luque, all guys who are on fire right now. And he went out there and he represented. And he took a big punch and he came back and he got tired and he weathered the storm. How can you say this man is not a fighter? And I'm so happy it didn't end in a knockout. And I'm so happy it didn't end early because then now we don't have to hear about the rigged nonsense. Every time, it's rigged, it's rigged. I'm convinced that the people who say that are just being paid to say that at this point because it's so ludicrous. What about that was rigged? What about any of this is rigged? Stop being so cynical. None of this was rigged. These two guys have too much self-respect to do that sort of thing. Punches hurt. They can land. You can fall. I have a ton of respect for what Jake Paul has done, what he has accomplished. I have a ton of respect for what Tyron Woodley did last night. His legacy is still intact. It is not ruined. Had he lost in the first round, different story, but he went the distance at 39 in a new sport against a guy who's 15 years younger than him, who's been doing boxing longer than he has for the last 3 years, focused solely on boxing. But if you can't look at that situation and say, this was good for boxing, this was a good night for boxing, again, as I've said before, and it's the same thing that I said about CM Punk. And isn't it funny? People roll their eyes like, let's not pretend that the UFC is above this sort of thing, or anyone in combat sports is above this sort of thing. This sort of thing, circus, freak show, whatever you want to say, special attraction, has been around for decades in all forms of combat sports. But again, this isn't the NBA, this isn't the NFL, this isn't the NHL, Major League Baseball, where there's a cap on the amount of people who can participate. This is the Wild West. And so last night, an event was created because of Jake Paul and his fight with Tyron Woodley. But as a result of that event that was created, because there wasn't an event that was happening regardless on a Sunday night in Cleveland on August 29th, 2021. But because of that, a lot more people know who Amanda Serrano is, who's a legit fighter, who's doing great things not only in boxing, but in MMA, who just won in an MMA fight via submission, who's won 27 fights in a row, who hasn't lost since 2012, who's top 3 pound for pound, and who may eventually become number 1 pound for pound. Who knows? I can assure you a lot more people know who Montana Love is. What a scene that was. What a fight that was against Ivan Baranchyk. Cleveland's own. What a pop he got. I know a lot more people know who Daniel Dubois is, who knocked out Giuseppe Cusimano in the first round with those 3 knockdowns. Came over from England for the first time in America, following in the footsteps of Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, who fought on Showtime for their first fights in America. Tommy TNT Fury had a big opportunity. In fact, one could say that he was maybe the biggest loser of the night, if only because how do you not at least knock down Anthony Pretty Boy Taylor, a guy who's fought in MMA at 135, at 145, at 155. I thought he didn't need a finish per se. It was only 4 rounds, but a knockdown I think would have really put him in pole position to get the Jake Paul fight. And of course, afterwards, the BT Sport cameras filmed this whole, brouhaha, and that might still be the fight. Remains to be seen. We don't know what's going to happen next. But isn't it amazing? And boxing is so great. I freaking love it. You got Frank Warren there. You got the British Commission calling up Anthony Taylor. Well, they didn't really call him. They told someone to tell him that on the night before the weigh-ins, they are changing the rounds of his fight, of the Tommy Fury-Anthony Taylor fight, from 6 to 4 because they say Tommy Fury, who off the top of my head, 10 amateur fights, going into this was 6-0, doesn't have enough experience to go 6 rounds, 6 3-minute rounds, 18 minutes total. So we're moving it to 4. What the heck? First of all, why does the British Commission have any kind of say over any of this? The fight was happening in Ohio. How does the Ohio Commission accept this? And let's not get started on the whole drug testing thing. But again, we see this with these commissions that don't hold a lot of events. And then they change it. Meanwhile, in the main event, you have Jake Paul, who's 3-0, going up against a guy who's 0-0. And that's an 8-round fight. How bizarre is all of that? But it's just like the crazy boxing world. These things happen in boxing, right? That was so weird because the promoter was like, oh, no, first, it's because Anthony Taylor is 0-1 as a boxer, so we can't go past 4. But Tyron Woodley's 0-0. But then they're like, oh, no, but he has 27 MMA fights. Well, Taylor has 12 MMA fights. Like, this is crazy what is going on here. Anyway, I thought he had a big opportunity to do something. He didn't do what he needed to do. But hey, that moment afterwards got him in Jake's face, and maybe that was enough. Who knows? But overall, it was just so great. The card, the week, the press events, everything was constructed like an MMA card. Usually, it's one big fight, maybe a second, and that's it. Those 5 fights had something for everyone. Actual legit boxers, for everyone who's worried about the sanctity of boxing, concerned about all of that. No, you had actual legit boxers underneath Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley. There were no shenanigans. There were finishes. There were fun fights. And that's the way boxing should be, in my opinion. And make no mistake about it, Jake Paul's not saving boxing. Boxing's doing just fine without Jake Paul. There's a ton of great fighters right now. The heavyweight division is on fire. We got, Fury and Wilder coming up, and you got Usyk and Anthony Joshua and all of these great names and up and comers like Daniel Dubois and whatnot, and obviously Canelo and Crawford, and hopefully Spence comes back. And women's boxing is doing great with Clarissa Shields and Katie Taylor's fighting this weekend. I mean, there's just a ton going on in the world of boxing. Boxing is doing just fine. No one needs to save boxing. It's all ludicrous when people say that. But hey, a little sprinkling of some special attractions here and there never hurt anyone. And so now the big question is, what happens next with Jake and Tyron? Afterwards, in that moment in the ring, it was a crazy scene. Logan Paul is there. I'm like, what the heck? How did I get here? This is amazing. I've dreamed of this. Tyron says he thought he won the fight. I thought he represented, but if I'm being honest, I don't think he won the fight. That's no knock. It's just there has to be a winner. There has to be a loser. I was surprised it was a split decision, but he says, hey, I'm going to get that tattoo if you give me a rematch. Now, if we're being honest, like the deal was different, right? The deal was different. The original deal was the loser gets a tattoo, but hey, shoot your shot. And Jake accepted it, right? But now it seems like there's some discrepancy as to, what the deal is and what the deal should be. No one got a tattoo, for the record. So that's still up in the air. I don't know if they go in that direction ultimately. I'm curious to see if Jake fights again this year. I think the plan was one more fight and maybe against a Tommy Fury, but let's be honest, he has the pick of the litter. What I would like to see next is, all right, I think the MMA thing is working. Let's be real. Like, there was more MMA media there at that event than boxing media. So MMA media is covering it. They're taking it seriously. The whole sport of MMA is paying attention to it. The fans are paying attention to it. So the MMA versus Jake Paul storyline gimmick is actually working. It is paying dividends. I think getting on Showtime was better than being on Triller, if only because it made it feel a little more legitimate. And that's not me knocking Triller. They're just new. Their format is different. The music, all that stuff. So this felt like, okay, you're kind of taking that step up to the home of boxing right now because, there's no HBO anymore. So the question is, does he go to another MMA fighter? Who can that person be? I know he's talked about Nathan, still under contract with the UFC. Masvidal's still under contract, of course. Connor's like the UFC isn't loaning anyone out there. Trust me, they are not doing that. And so who's out there that can sell this? I think the ship has sailed, unfortunately, for Dylan Dennis. I don't know. I mean, he hasn't fought in so long. He's not a striker. I don't know if that's appealing. I'd be happy for him if he got it. I'm not trying to knock him. I just don't know if there's any momentum for that fight right now. There's probably a little more momentum for Tommy Fury. Is there another guy out there? I'd like to see them not go in the direction of, a YouTuber or a hockey player. Like every fight has felt bigger, and he wins, and the train rolls along. And so it's just a fascinating time in the world of combat, of boxing, of MMA, and there's MMA versus boxing. You got Vitor Belfort and Oscar De La Hoya fighting not this weekend, next, and Anderson Silva doing his thing. I mean, wow, what a time to be covering this crazy world of combat sports. I'm just very thankful to still be here and to still be doing it and to have a platform where I can talk about it freely with all of you. And I'm just so excited. And oh, by the way, on top of all of that, there was a UFC event this past weekend. Shout out to Giga Chikadze. I'd love to have him on the show. If you know what I'm saying. But alas, I digress. A couple of tough winners, tough loss for Kevin Lee. PFL had their event as well. Brendan Loughnane lost a tough one in the main event, but there's just a lot. And then of course this weekend we've got the Darren Till fight, the UK card that's happening in Vegas, the debut of one Paddy Pimblett. There's just so much going on. And I'm just so happy to be here.